The 2014 Oakland Athletics were a very interesting team. On one hand, in the first half of the season, really up until the final 2 months of the season, the Oakland Athletics were a very, very good team. They were standing, usually in first place or up there with the Angels in 2014. One point in August, they were 28 games over 500 and atop of the AL West. But then you go to those final 2 months where the A's sort of declined. And although they did reach the 2014 postseason, they fell to the Kansas City Royals in an absolutely crazy game. And if you're an A's fan, and that was a game for the ages. You probably had a lot of emotions during that game. I know I sure did. Seeing the A's sort of collapse in that game in Kansas City in a one-game wild card playoff where they lost 9-8 to the Royals. And that was a game that sort of started our downfall for the next 3 or so years. The A's in 2014, that was their last year of playoff contention until the 2018 season. So the A's at that point, though, were coming off back-to-back division championships, winning in 2012 and 2013. The A's in 2014 also had the most All-Stars out of anyone. They also had home run derby champion Yoenis Cespedes, who was later traded for John Lester on sort of a rental deal. And that was a deal that surprised a lot of people. But yeah, the A's All-Star-wise had Yoenis Cespedes, Brandon Moss, Scott Kazmir, Sean Doolittle, Derek Norris, Josh Donaldson, and Jeff Samardzija all represent the green and gold in the Midsummer Classic. And that was really exciting for the A's. They had a very good start to the beginning of the season. They were the first team to 50 wins, and they were really showing MLB that they were a legit team. And then unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, at the end of the season, they collapsed. And, that was sort of kind of showed where their holes were, where their insecurities were with the team. The collapse, I think, started with the Yoenis Cespedes trade. John Lester, don't get me wrong, he's a great pitcher, he's a future Hall of Famer, but I think it was sort of the issue was, Cespedes had a lot of pop in his bat, he had a lot of power, and don't get me wrong, Lester was great, and we did need pitching, but I think, I just didn't think it was a trade that worked out for us in the long run, of course. And so, I think it was the type of thing where the A's thought they needed to fix one thing when they had, a satisfactory amount of pitchers that probably could take them into the wild card. Billy Beane basically came out and said, without John Lester, they wouldn't even be in the playoffs. And I think that's, maybe a little too far there. But, following that 2014 season, the A's ended up trading Josh Donaldson to the Toronto Blue Jays for, some prospects at the time, guys that sort of have come and gone. They also traded Brandon Moss, who was to the Indians, and that was for Joey Wendell, who obviously isn't even on the team anymore. And Jeff Samardzija was traded, so all of the All-Stars were gone, basically. Derek Norris was traded, and a lot of other guys were just gone, sort of under the radar. And so, the A's, 2014, it was the type of thing where, and I feel like a lot of the A's playoff runs go like this when they're a wild card team. Unfortunately, we usually have to deal with the team in our division, and in the more present day it's the Astros, but we had to deal with the Angels in our division, who were absolutely killing it in 2014. The Angels were top of the division. They had it was Mike Trout's only playoff appearance of his career, and they ended up losing to the Royals. The Royals sort of were a dark horse, but sort of in that wild card game, I just remember thinking, if the Royals can do this to us, they can definitely do it to the next team in their path. And they ended up doing that. But the A's, they sort of went with sort of a bullpen game in that, and it didn't work out for them. But in that season, don't get me wrong, a lot of good moments. That team was very fun. The infield group was great. The outfield group was great. The pitching, like I said, could have used some work. And I think that's sort of why the A's were so embarrassingly bad in 2015, the year after, because I think in 2015, the A's, they didn't trade that many pitchers. They traded Samardzija. Scott Kazmir was still on the team, but they traded a lot of those guys. Obviously, John Lester headed to Chicago. And so, not only was their offense gutted because Donaldson was gone, Cespedes was gone from, already the previous year. And you also lost Brandon Moss, who had a lot of pop in his bat. So, I think that's why the A's sort of collapsed following this year. It's just they traded off their good assets, and their existing assets just weren't good enough. They finished with an 88-74 record, which, for today's standards, if, I guess in the A's more recent playoff runs, they've gotten around 97 wins. So to think that they only had 88 is pretty interesting, considering, how hard it is to make MLB playoffs, especially back then with less teams than the current playoff bracket. But, the A's, they ended up, right where the other teams did on the offseason. And it was sort of the thing that you could kind of see the foreshadowing coming when the collapse started in August, or maybe mid-August, when the Angels got really good. The Angels, a lot of people don't remember, were 10 games ahead of the A's at that end of the season. And so, yeah, the A's, they qualified for the playoffs barely. And, I do see Billy Beane's point. The pitching was needed, and John Lester probably was a big reason why the A's even made the playoffs. I mean, to think that Seattle, just a game back of the A's in the wild card race. So the A's very well could have missed the playoffs, and the Royals obviously beat us either way. But, it's the kind of thing that's like, we don't know what would have happened if we didn't trade Cespedes. But we did make the playoffs with Lester, and Lester was good. I'm not going to deny that, but, it's the type of thing, it's wishy-washy. So, yeah, the 2014 A's, a team flooded with talent, 7 All-Stars, right? I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. And they really carried over that success from 2012 and 2013 into that middle part of the season, early part of the season. And then, unfortunately, you look at the end of the season, losing these close games to the Rangers even. I remember watching that final series of the regular season, and we lost. We didn't lose the series to the Rangers, but we tied it. And there were a lot of games we lost that we should have won. Very close games, especially against the Angels too. I remember losing a series against the Angels in September, and that was really rough. And the Angels were a very good team, but I feel like the A's could have beat them more than they should have. And so, yeah. Anyways, that's the 2014 Oakland Athletics in a nutshell. A team, can't believe it's been 8 years, but it was sort of the last glory year of that early playoff success that Bob Melvin cultivated, and it was definitely an embodiment of Moneyball. I mean, those All-Stars I mentioned, sort of didn't really thrive anywhere else. I guess Cespedes, you could make a case he did go to the World Series the year after. Of course, John Lester did, but he was acquired mid-season anyway, so that doesn't really count. I mean, yeah, if you think about it, what other guys from that All-Star group really, thrived elsewhere besides Cespedes? Not really many. I mean, Josh Donaldson did, of course, but Derek Norris, didn't really hear his name much when he left. Sean Doolittle, he stayed with the team a couple more years, so did Kazmir. Brandon Moss, sort of fell under the radar. Samardzija was sort of average. And so I feel like, the A's sort of took these players and made them into stars. And I think when they traded all of them off, they'd hoped that new group would do that. But it didn't really end up happening until, of course, the Chapman era got drafted. Olsen got drafted. So, yeah, that's the 2014 A's. Let me know your thoughts on this team. I still have this cap, and yeah, I love it. But it's a little depressing thinking about that wild card game. Sometimes I just go and watch the highlights of it. That 9-8 loss to the Royals. It was a very roller coaster of emotions. Salvador Perez hitting that walk-off down the left field line, and the A's lose. So, yeah, anyways, guys, that'll do it. Let me know your thoughts. I'll see you guys later. And, yeah, go A's.